Hey, how's it going guys? My name is Dom, and in today's video we're going to be using Node.js and the Express web server to build an API. If you haven't built an API before, trust me, you want to watch today's video. This project is going to be a great introduction to developing REST APIs and seeing just how easy it is to receive JSON and post something and then send it back and so on, of course, using an API. And just before getting into today's video, I just want to quickly remind you, for anyone who missed my last few videos, I'm now uploading courses to Udemy. My recent course was a JavaScript DOM crash course, which I think is perfect for JavaScript beginners who want to dive into the world of the JavaScript DOM. All right, so first I want to show you what this API is going to be able to support. Okay, so before jumping into the code for today's video, I want to demonstrate what API we're going to be building and what it supports. So there's going to be essentially two parts of today's video. The first part is going to be a really simple endpoint, which is going to return a customized outfit, which may help you decide what to wear in the morning, as an example, right? And the second part of today's video is going to be to give the ability for users to create comments and also retrieve comments from the API. So a comment might be a video comment or a post comment, whatever it might be. So the first endpoint here is going to look like this. Localhost on port 3000 going to /outfit. If I send this across, we get a JSON response containing some properties here. So the top is going to be navy, the jeans are going to be dark gray, and shoes are going to be black. I can send it again and we get another randomized outfit. So you can think of this like one of those random quote generators or random meme generator APIs out there. So it works in a very similar fashion. Now, the second part of this video, when posting comments, that's when things get useful. Okay, so we can change this to be a post request. We can say post comments just like this, and it's going to support a JSON body. So I can say, let's post a new comment, and the comment content is going to be, hello, this was a great video. Something like this. All right, I can send it across and we get 201 created, and it gives me the comment ID. All right. So now with the comment ID, it's been saved on the file system. We can now go to get /comments / the comment ID, send it across, and we get back the content which we originally posted. So that right there is going to be the capabilities of the API being built in today's video. I hope you guys can learn something and you enjoy this one. Okay, so the first step as part of today's video is going to be to install an API client called Insomnia. Now, an API client is basically just a piece of software that lets you use and test APIs. So we're going to be using Insomnia to interact with the API we're going to be building in today's video. Now, this of course is going to be optional, but I do highly recommend you install this. That way you can follow this video one for one. So I'll leave a link to this down below in the description, and you guys can go ahead, download and install it. Now, you're also going to need to have Node.js installed, obviously, because we're going to be coding this using Node.js. So if you got that already installed, then perfect. We can move on to the actual code. So hopping inside VS Code right here, as we can see, I've got a new empty directory. So we're going to be starting from scratch to create the API, which I showed you in the intro of this video. Now, the first step here is going to be to initialize a new Node.js project. So we can do this by saying npm init-y, press enter, and we have a new Node.js project set up. Next step is going to be to install all of the dependencies. So I've got a couple here for this project. So we'll say here npm install. We're going to be using Express as the web server. We can also install cause, Lodash, and then UID. So we're going to need all of these 4 packages for this API. Now, some of these might be optional depending on what you guys want to do, but for the purposes of this video, let's install those 4 packages right there. We can now refresh the file tree, and of course we have the package.json and we have all of the modules installed. Okay. Next step is going to be to quickly set up a start script here. So we'll say when we use the start command, we're just going to simply say node index.js to run the index.js file, which we're going to create right now. We'll say new file index.js, and then in the console, just run npm start, and we can see it runs without any errors. I'll say console.log and I'll say hello just to confirm this is definitely working. I'll run it again and we get hello right there. So perfect, everything is going well so far. Now, the next step is going to be to load in all of the dependencies. Okay, so I want to get this out of the way first off. So we'll say firstly here, const fs equal to require. Now we're going to be requiring fs/promises. So fs just means the file system built-in package into Node.js, and we're going to be using the promises version of that, and we'll see why later on in this video. We're going to also require the Express web server, so require Express as per usual. And we can also require cause in the same way. So const cause equal to require cause. This of course stands for cross-origin resource sharing, and we're going to be taking advantage of this in the API, and I'll show you more on this later on. We're also going to require Lodash here, underscore equal to require Lodash. We're going to be using a Lodash method to pick a random item from an array. And lastly here we can say const, and we're going to be using object destructuring here to simply grab v4 and name this UID equal to then requiring the UID package. So we're going to be using the UID package to generate a unique ID for a comment which the user is going to be able to post using this API. So more on many of these things later on. Let's now set up the API server. Okay, let's hop down here. I'm going to say const app equal to, and then call the express function just like that, and then dropping down here we can now say app.listen, and we're going to be listening here on port 3000. Once the server has started up, we'll just say console.log API server is running just like that. So we have the core code done for the API server. We can now say npm start to, of course, start up the server, and we get the message right there. So now, technically, we've got an API server running on port 3000, but there are no endpoints defined. Let's just quickly test the API server. So heading into Insomnia, you can go inside a workspace here and create a new one. And once you're inside here, you can begin to create a new request. So in terms of the request URL, we're going to say http://localhost at port 3000. It's going to be a GET request, okay? I'll press send right here, and we get 404 not found, which means the API server is running. If I go into the header section, we can see we have all of the response headers coming back, so we definitely have a working server on port 3000, okay? Cool. Going back inside VS Code here, the next step is going to be to define that first endpoint which I showed you, which is going to return a JSON response of a random outfit. Okay, so pretend you're going to be using this to pick your outfit for every day of the week. All right. So we'll say right down here underneath app, we can just say app.get. So this right here is going to be defining a new route. Okay, so it's going to be a get endpoint, and the route is going to be /outfit. Okay, now I can say inside here, request and response, just to grab onto both the request and the response objects. Remember, the request object contains information relating to the request that was sent through from the API client in this case, things like the JSON body, any auth, the query, the header, and so on. Now, most of those we're not going to worry about, but just to point that out. And of course, the response object here is everything that the server sends back to the API client. So of course, you have request, then you have the response coming back. So inside this outfit endpoint, I just want to firstly just say response.send, and I'll just say here, this is working. Okay, so this right here is a very simple endpoint, and we're simply saying when you make a request to it, we're going to send back this response. Let's go back inside let's run the server once again. So I'll just say npm start. Now guys, I do know you can use nodemon here if you want to make it automatically restart, but I'll keep it simple and keep running the npm start command. Now going back inside Insomnia, let's press send again. We get the same thing. Let's now define the endpoint. We can say /outfit and send it across, and we get this is working. So the endpoint is working. We can now change this to return a JSON object of a random outfit. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's go back inside VS Code here. We can now define a couple of options because this endpoint is going to return an option for your top, jeans, and then shoes. Okay. So we can say here const tops equal to, then simply define some colors. So we'll say here a black top, we can say white, orange, and then navy. So these are all the possible options for a top. We can do the exact same thing here, this time for jeans. And we can say we have either gray jeans, we have dark gray, black, or navy, just like that. And once again, the same thing this time for shoes. And we'll just have white shoes, gray shoes, and then black shoes. Okay. So we have all of the possible options defined. We can now simply pick a random one from each of these arrays and send it back to the client. This will be very straightforward using Lodash. So we'll go down here and we'll say response.json. Okay. Now, of course, using the JSON method here, it's going to send back whatever you pass through here. Oops, sorry guys. Whatever you pass through here, it's going to send back as a JSON string and also close off the request. Okay, just like it does for send. All right. So request.json, and we'll say here top equal to underscore sample. All right, then pass through top. So the sample method or the sample function is going to take in an array and then pick a random item. We can do the same thing here, this time for jeans equal to underscore sample and then pass through jeans. And lastly for shoes underscore dot sample and pass through shoes, just like that. Okay, I can now just save this and restart the server. Go back in Insomnia, press send, and we get this right here. Orange for top, navy for jeans, and white for shoes. I'll just zoom in here, guys, so you can see it a little bit better. Something like that. So orange, navy, and white. Let's send it again, and we get more random options or random values for each one of these properties here. So we can see you can now start to use this API in the morning. Maybe make a request and it tells you what top, jeans, and shoes to wear. I don't know, guys, but you can see there, that's how we can easily define our own custom code under this endpoint and then return with the data. And you guys can put whatever code you want inside this endpoint. Now, that endpoint right there was the simplest one we're going to be covering in today's video. I want to sort of step it up a little bit, and I want to take a look at sending data to the API and then actually saving it. So we're going to be doing this with comments. So we're going to allow the user or the API client the ability to send through a comment for a video or a post or whatever it might be. All right. So going back inside VS Code here, let's just minimize the outfit endpoint and then drop down here. We're going to go straight in for a post endpoint. All right. So we'll go down here and we'll say app.post. Okay. So now we're defining a post endpoint. All right. Now this route is going to be /comments. Okay. So /comments in a post request is going to allow you to post a new comment to the server and then save it. Of course, we have to do the hard work. We have to make it actually take the comment and then save it on the server side. So we're going to do that right now. So it's going to work the same way. We're going to define the request and the response as per usual. Okay, just like this. Now, inside the comments endpoint, all right, the first step is going to be to generate a new ID for the comment, because of course the user is going to be sending through some content. So I actually want to show you guys what the request is going to look like first before then implementing it in code. Okay, so going back inside Insomnia here, let's change this to now be a post request to match the endpoint defined in VS Code just before. Then we can say /comments here. All right. Now I'm going to hit this drop down here, and I'm going to be sending through JSON as the request body. All right. So Insomnia is now going to allow me to define some JSON inside here. And we're going to say for the comment, or for the new comments to be posted, it's going to have a content property. Okay. And we'll say here, this is a comment just like that. Now, when I send this across, we expect this content or this comment here to be saved to the server side, and then the server is going to respond with a comment ID so I can retrieve it later on. All right, so we have this sort of structure defined. Let's go back in the code and actually support that behavior. So the first step here, like I mentioned earlier on, is to define a new comment ID, which is going to be used. So we'll say here const ID equal to request.params. My mistake, guys, sorry. It's going to simply call UID, just like that. All right, so by calling the UID method or the UID function from up here, it's going to generate a new UID for this comment. Okay, let's now just console.log the ID just to see what we're actually working with here. I'm also just going to say response.send status, and we're going to be sending a 201. The 201 response status, response code, means the object was successfully created. Okay, let's close this and run it again. Go back inside Insomnia, press send, and we get 201 created. Perfect. And back in VS Code in the terminal, we get this right here as the unique ID for the comment. Let's hop back up here now, and we're going to grab onto the content which was sent to us by the API client. So we'll say here const content equal to, then we're going to say here request.body.content. Now, this is not going to work. I want to show you guys what happens real quick. So I'll just pass through content inside the console.log here, because essentially when I'm saying request.body, I'm referring to the JSON that was sent across right here. I'm now saying .content to get the content property inside the request body. Okay. Now I'll close this, run it again. I'm now going to send that request off, and we get this right here. So we can see we get cannot read properties of undefined. It's basically saying request.body is undefined. So by default, Express is not going to support sending or receiving JSON. So we need to say, well, we need to tell Express to support it. So up here, we can just say app.use, and we can define express.json just like that. And this right here is going to be some middleware, which is going to support JSON. So now we can just close this and rerun the server. We can try it again, guys. Press send, and it's now successful. Back in VS Code, we get this is a comment, which of course refers to the content being provided. Okay. Now, since we have the content, we can now begin to write to the file and actually save this comment, because we're going to be just simply using text files to store this data. Of course, in a real application, you might be using a database to store a comment, but in this example here, let's keep it simple and just use text files. But before we save to disk, there's going to be one additional step, and it's going to be to check if the user actually provided some content. Okay. So if, for example, they weren't able to provide the content property, this is simply going to be undefined. So we can say here, if not content, so if there is no content, then we can say, okay, return response.send status, and we'll just say here 401. Sorry, my mistake, 400. Okay. So sending back the 400 response code, if they did not provide some content, is telling the API client, well, you've done something wrong, you've sent a bad request through. Now, we are using return here because if we don't use return, then the code down here is still going to run. So make sure you have a return statement when you are trying to exit early from a Express endpoint. Okay. Now I'll just close this and rerun the API server. I can now not provide some content. So I'll say here content1 just to change the property name. Sends it across and we get 400 bad requests. Let's make it content once again, send it and it's fine. Let's remove all the JSON and we get bad requests. So you can see how we're able to, of course, detect if the user has provided some content. So if they did provide some content, we can now start to save to file. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of today's video, we're going to be using the promises version of file system. This means that we're going to be able to utilize async await when it comes to interacting with the file system. In this case here, it's going to be to write a new file. All right. So we're going to be storing all of the comments inside a directory called data. So within here, we can say await fs.mkdir. So we're going to be making a new directory on the file system. This directory is going to be data, just like that, /comments. Okay. We're going to say here also recursive equal to true. That way it is also going to create comments along with data, making it recursive. I want to stop right here, save this. Okay. And we're going to see an error real quick, guys. That's because we have not declared this function as being asynchronous. So we can just say here async in the function header. Okay. Now we can use await. All right. Let's hop back down here now and run that script again. It's running. I can now make the request. That's fine. If I go back in VS Code, we now have the data and then comments directory created for us. So this right here is going to ensure we have the directory available to us. So we can now begin to save some content or some files inside there. We can now say await fs.write file. We're going to be writing a file. Now, we're going to be using JavaScript template strings, the backticks near the one on your keyboard here. We can now say data /comments. We're going to be writing a new text file inside the comments directory, going to id.txt. So saving the UID as, UID.text. Okay. We can also say here as the second argument, the actual content for the file. It's of course going to be the content which we received from the API client. All right. We can now save this here. Restart the application, go back inside Insomnia. We can say this is a comment, press send. We get 201 created, so everything worked fine. Go back in VS Code and we now have a new text file with the UID as the name containing the content that we provided through the API. So we can see here how easy it is to create files using Express and of course save the data that was received from the API client or the API user. Also guys, keep in mind that when I say API client or API user, I'm also referring to your front end JavaScript application. If you got some sort of app written in Vue or React and you're trying to interact with the API client is JavaScript. Okay, so using fetch or Axios, whatever you're using to, of course, send through requests. So the very last step inside this endpoint right here is going to be to send back the comment ID because, of course, when the API user sends through some content, there's no ID defined. So it would like to know the ID of the comment that they created so they can interact with it next time. Okay, so back inside here, we're going to say response dot, this time we're going to say status. So the status method is going to say for this for this response, I want to send back this status, then we can just say dot, then say JSON. So once again, just chaining on a JSON response, much like we did up here inside the outfit. So the JSON here is going to be ID equal to ID. All right. I can now rerun the server. I can send the same request through with the same comment. And now we get the comment ID. So I can save this and make a second request to then get that comment. And we're going to be implementing that endpoint right now. But we can see here, if I keep sending the request, we're going to get multiple IDs and of course, multiple files created inside our data directory. Okay, cool. So then the last endpoint of today's video is going to be to define the endpoint, which lets you get a comment by its ID. All right. So we're going to minimize this endpoint here, and we're going to say here app.get. So defining a get endpoint for the comment by ID. So this route is going to look like this: /comments, then /:ID. We're going to be accepting an ID as a root parameter inside the URL. Okay. So once again, we're going to say request and then response. All right. And the first step inside this endpoint here is going to be to grab the ID from the URL. So we'll say here const ID equal to request.params.id. Because we specified :ID, it's a wildcard. It can be whatever the user has provided. So we're simply getting their provided ID. Now, this right here is going to look like this in Insomnia. Let's grab the ID of this recently created comment, then change this to be a get request, then do / and provide the comment just like that. So now this route is going to match this sort of URL that we provide right here. Okay, cool. So we're grabbing the ID out of the route parameter, the ID right there. Okay, we're now going to say let content. So defining a new variable to hold the comment's content. We need to, of course, read the file containing the comment, which of course is done using the ID. So we can say here try. And we're going to try to read that file. If it doesn't exist, it's going to simply catch, or it's going to throw an error, and we can catch it and deal with that situation. But first, let's attempt to read that file. We can say content equal to, then using once again await, this time saying fs.read file. So we'll say, oh, my mistake guys, fs.read file. So we're going to read the file at, once again using backticks, we'll say data /comments / then pass through here id.txt just like that. And we're going to be reading this as UTF-8 for the encoding. Now, it's going to simply assign the content to this variable, and we can now return it. Let's put the catch around this try real quick and receive the error. We're going to deal with this later on. Okay. And hop down here and simply say response.json, and we're going to pass through here the content equal to the content variable. And also, I do know, guys, that you can simply shorthand this to be content like that, but for completeness, I'm going to keep it like this. I'll now save this, rerun the server, and we get an error. The same problem as last time. Let's make this function async. Perfect. Try again. Go back in Insomnia. We're going to try and get this comment by the ID, send it across, and we get this in the response. So that's working perfectly fine. Let's pass in an ID which doesn't exist. We get this. Okay. So to fix this, we're going to simply, because when that happened, it couldn't find the file. So we enter the catch statement. Now in the catch statement, we're going to simply say return response.send status. We're going to send the status of 404 not found. It can't find the comment. Let's rerun the server. And this time we're going to see we get 404 not found as the response. So There we go, guys. That's how to create your own API using Node.js. Now, the challenge for today's video is going to be to implement a patch endpoint in order to update the content of a comment. You may also wish to explore things like a delete or even returning multiple properties or accepting multiple properties for a comment. Things like the comment, maybe who posted the comment or the date it was created and things like that. But we can see here, it's pretty straightforward to define an API using Node.js and the Express framework. And you can start using this in your own front-end applications. Hey guys, sorry, but while editing today's video, I realized that I forgot to mention cross-origin resource sharing, or the CORS package, which I showed at the very beginning of this video. So if you do want to enable cross-origin resource sharing for your API, which is probably gonna be the case, you can do so. I'm gonna show you how to do it right now, but just so you know, if you would like to call your API from your front-end React or Vue app, it is likely you're going to want to enable CORS. So hopping down here underneath the app.use, we're also going to say app.use and then say express.cors. So calling this right here is going to make that work. So if you do encounter errors when using the API from the front end inside JavaScript, then you can enable CORS right here and you should be good to go. And that is all for today's video, guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. As usual, if you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.